talk with a team that might be Giants.
Thank you very much, Mr. Technics. I'm joined here by Adri after his win there. So you guys went for this really interesting composition with triple tier and basically forgave the whole early and mid game, but then it worked out. Were you so confident that that was always going to work?
We didn't really know what our comp was going to look like until the last 2 picks, but we were pretty happy with the outcome. We knew like with Ezreal, with Gauntlet and Varus, we would be able to poke a lot, and they didn't have enough engaging tools to deal with us.
Well, it looked like that in the game, Adri. So right now, you put a great buffer between yourself and the rest of the teams who were tied up with you coming into today. If we get into tiebreaker scenarios, who would you least want to face?
I think we would least want to face Rocket, because games against them are usually super long, and like they're kind of irregulars like us, so we don't know if we're going to win or not.
Okay, but if you do win, then looking towards playoffs, how far do you think the Giants can push it?
I think if we manage to secure 5th place, we can maybe beat Unicorns in the best of 5s. So I think we're confident that we will make it into semifinals.
Okay, well, best of luck on that endeavor. Mr. Adri, we're going to shoot it over to the analyst desk to break down the game.
Thank you, Mr. Pulse. Yeah, well, if they make it into playoffs, confident they can push it all the way to semis. That would definitely be very good for the Giants. Let's look at this game, though. Let's start by pulling out the team composition, because starting off, well, pretty good composition coming out of Copenhagen Wolves, we heard here echoed at the desk.
Yeah, like, a lot of things worry me for this game. The Wolves, they're coming out with a typical skirmish composition, and that's fine. They pick up Sivir on first draft or in first rotation, because Giants, they ban Kalista and Draven, and then they still give away Sivir, so that's not a problem. But then they build this triple tier composition, and we heard Adri say in the interview, we didn't know what our composition was going to look like until the last 2 picks. That's something you really don't want to hear, because I can't stress this enough. This team composition runs 3 tiers. That means you spend 2100 gold on mana. That's not really a combat set. Yes, you can argue that Ryze perhaps has some utility from that, but in the first 5000 gold for your team, or 6000, you just spent 2000 of that on mana, and that should be punished by every team, especially the Wolves had the tools to do so. Luckily for Giants, the shot calling wasn't quite there for the Wolves, but this worries me for them, and we can call the graphic down by now because we've obviously seen all the picks. This triple poke comp, yes, it looks nice in the late game, yes, you come back, but you should get completely dismantled in the early game by teams really using that Sivir. You know, just group up, press R. It really is that simple.
I agree with you, and I want to echo that sentiment, because the thing that helped the Copenhagen Wolves win their last 2 games was being decisive, was being aggressive in the early game. So Giants were rolling the dice and hoping the Wolves were not going to do that. Luckily for the Giants, they didn't, because by the time we hit 25 minutes, it was around a 1,000, 2,000 K gold lead, which simply wasn't enough. Giants had early dragons. Copenhagen Wolves were playing relatively timid, considering the tools they had available to them. And then as the game continued to progress out, the Wolves again just showed they weren't, in my opinion, making the full use of the Sivir, weren't making the full use of their composition.
Yeah, but I feel like if you're going to pull this off against any team, Wolves is a pretty good team to make it against, because they are like infamous for not being to close out this game. So I guess the coach was like, yeah, well, I just pick 3 tiers. It's not like Wolves is going to end the game before 40 minutes anyway, so we're going to have time to scout.
The worrying thing is that the coaches probably didn't think we picked 3 tiers. It was only at the end of the composition, apparently, that came out. And I think this is something that we've said of Giants a couple of times now, that they aren't able to amass a lead at 20 minutes, and they have to rely on these comeback mechanics or scaling mechanics. I'm sorry, but in playoffs, I don't know how far it's going to get you in a certain part of the bracket.
It's interesting, though, because Giants, if they do place where Adri was hoping against the Unicorns of Love, both UOL and Giants have been on a downswing in the second half of the split. Giants are 3 wins, 5 losses in the last 4 weeks. They came out the gate swinging, surprised absolutely everybody at the beginning of the split. But as all of the teams around them have consistently improved, the Giants simply have not. So I'm interested to see how much growth they can get. There is a week off. There is a new patch as well. So there's some room to wiggle.
Yeah, the first 9 games of the split, Giants went 5-4. In the last 9, they went 3-6. So definitely a big discrepancy right there. And we see the same patterns happening over and over. But obviously, they still were tenacious enough to pull off this win. They still stayed calm where they had to. And the biggest thing is they recognized that for a composition that the Wolves were running into Giants' composition, dragons were important. 5 dragons aspect could have been what they call a win condition, whether you like that word or not. You know, it could have won them the game. But Giants got 2 early dragons that stunted the growth of the composition from the Wolves, and then they just played carefully enough to take it home.
Something I would have liked to see from the Wolves this game as well, getting like Righteous Glory and a Talisman, because it was like the serial ult was just not enough against the Ezreal Gauntlet, and the flanks were really poor from them. Like they just didn't have the tools to engage that they needed.
Yeah, they were just outranged. At one point, Varus Poke and as well Q outranges Hook and Cocoon, and that leaves only Shenton with primary engage, and at that point, Alistair can just play goalkeeper.
Yep, and Giants with that are still in that playoff race. Let's take a look at the standings as we have all these important matches here today. Of course, unfortunately, that means for the Copenhagen Wolves that they are now automatically relegated out of the LCS, out of the summer split, and we'll see them in the Challenger Series for the spring of 2016.
Well, SK is obviously going happy with that. They're 5-12 right now, so 1 win ahead of the Wolves, and they can no longer be tied, I believe, because due to the better head-to-head. So they're guaranteed into the promotion tournament. So they will play with less stress later today and might cause an upset against Elements.
Yeah, and of course, when you look at the other 4 teams, we need to see who's going to take those final 2 playoff spots. As Stress said on the cast today, Giants now have a foot in the door. We'll find out if anybody else can close that on them, or if Giants are going to waltz their way into a quarterfinal berth.
Yeah, very, very interesting, and that was only game 1. It's time for us to step away for a moment, but when we return, Gambit will take to the stage against H2K, who have secured rather their playoff spot and have nothing to lose. Don't touch that browser. We'll be right back.
It's quiet.
It's the quiet before the storm. Do you know the root sandstorm?
Yeah.
Sing it.
No, you need this steering wheel, you know?
Audrey just melts on the spot, but Shook is going to have to juggle the tower aggro. He does. He goes up, but he's taken down by Whirlin. Meanwhile, the Wolves continue to tank this. That's Audrey Hook. On him. He is not quite down yet. However, Lenny is going to try to be safe, but he finally falls. Haas is going down, but it's Godfrey is going very low. Lenny, meanwhile, in the back trying to tank up 3 members. All the while, Godfrey is down. So is Koss. And they have knocked the Copenhagen Wolves out of the LCS.